am Amy Vetter, and welcome to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. This valuable time is for you to pause in your day and go on your own self-journey. Discover the beliefs that are holding you back from living your best life at work and at home. Learn from the guests on this show as they share their inspirational stories on how they found ways to break internal beliefs that were no longer serving them. Because if you believe you can, you will. And our podcast begins now. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, where I interview Jeff Cook, co-founder and CEO of Bytecheck. His 20-plus year career has spanned being a CPA with a background in both financial and IT auditing, as well as being a SOC 2 expert, AICPA volunteer, and committee member. He has formed SOC practices at 3 different firms and then helped to develop Bytecheck, a software automation tool designed to help both the client and the auditor. During our conversation, we talked about Jeff's journey from starting out in northern New Jersey and having a dad as a CPA that later became a CFO that guided his path in wanting to go into his own accounting career, and how he took pivots along the way from being an auditor into IT and eventually developing his own tech company with his co-founder. Hopefully this episode will give you little nuggets that will help you in your leadership capabilities from Jeff's learnings, as well as be able to look at how our belief systems can change along the way that affect our ability to lead and improve as a human and in business. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please share, like, subscribe to this podcast so that others can receive the benefits of these stories as well. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs. And today I'm with Jeff Cook. And Jeff, would you like to just give the audience a little background on yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Amy. I'm Jeff Cook. I'm the co-founder and CFO at a company called Bytecheck. We do a lot of automation around IT auditing and controls, things like that, and then also helping with assessments, IT audit assessments, things of that nature. I'm a 20-year professional career, been a CPA for the last 15 years, so definitely took that non-traditional route, which I'm sure we're going to talk about a little bit. But yeah, happy to be here.
Great. Well, thanks so much for being on. So let's start in the beginning. Maybe you can start where you grew up and siblings and so what your parents did. Just give a little background on yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in northern New Jersey, about half hour, 45 minutes outside of New York City and near a town called Morristown in northern Jersey. And my dad was a CPA as well. He was a CFO for many years. So that's kind of how I got some interest in accounting and took an accounting course in high school. And that's I aced that course. It was almost like it came natural. So I said, all right, well, if this stuff is that easy, maybe I should look into it in college because it looks like a pretty good career. My dad's had a pretty good career, so let me check that out. And that's how I ended up being an accounting major and went to Loyola in Baltimore for college. So that's where I also met my wife, is in Baltimore and at Loyola. And after Loyola, I did move back to New Jersey briefly. I worked at a company you might remember, a little company called Arthur Anderson back in the day. And so I was there. I actually was interning and doing clerk type work for a couple summers with them before I even graduated. And then once I graduated, I got to full time. And sure enough, 9 months after I started full time is when everything collapsed. So I was part of the 80,000 other people that kind of lost their jobs in that weird situation. But for me, it turned out to be not a bad thing, because what I did was I was kind of thinking about making the move to the DC area to be closer to my future wife. Ended up moving down to Maryland, joined up with a regional firm in Maryland called Aronson, and worked for them for over 12 years. Had some wonderful mentors. Shout out to Lisa Sines. Shout out to Lexi Kessler.
Lisa.
shout out to some unbelievable mentors I had during my Aronson career, and learned so much there. Did traditional financial accounting and auditing for those years, got my CPA during that time. And what ended up happening, Amy, was I kind of took this shift. And I'm rambling, by the way. If you need me to back off.
Yeah, let's back up before you get there.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
So let's go back. Okay. So your father was a CPA, and what did your mom do?
Real estate agent.
Okay.
Yep. So my mom, she definitely was real estate agent, buy, sell side, whatever it was in the New Jersey area. She knew New Jersey inside and out. We all grew up in New Jersey, so it was that was her deal.
And then, did you have siblings, or?
I do. I've got a sister who's 9 years older than me, so quite the gap. So it was kind of almost, sometimes it felt like having two moms at certain times. But my sister, she kind of did a variety of things over time. She worked in like sonograms and things like that for a while. And then now she's a dance teacher. So she teaches dance. Oh, wow. And my nieces, they're national winter dance competitions and all that kind of stuff. My nieces are extraordinary. And in fact, one of them goes to a dance school here in the DC area. So.
Okay.
Yep.
So when you were younger, did you have hobbies, or what were your interests before deciding you could ace being an accountant? Because let me tell you, I did not feel that way. So you're very lucky that when you went through accounting, that's how you felt the first time.
Yeah. And back then too, Amy, it was like the green paper,
Oh yeah, like T accounts. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. In pencil and all that kind of good
I didn't understand it. Yeah. I only understood bank statements, and this was the opposite of bank statements, and I could not wrap my head around it. So
somehow I knew this had to be here, this had to be here, mm-hmm. Right? It has to balance out. So, but I mean, as a kid, I loved being outside. So, we used to play outside all the time. I played street hockey almost every day in Northern Jersey. Hockey's a pretty big deal. So played street hockey a lot, played some football and on the lawns and stuff like that too. In the winter, when the ponds would freeze, we'd play on the ponds and the pond hockey and all that kind of stuff. So really cool. And that was probably the biggest. Oh, and then in the summer times, we used to play night tag. That was so much fun. So that was like the big things. We used to play outside, video games were a thing, but they weren't a huge thing. It was video games were for rainy days or maybe night, like after nighttime, but really it was more about being outside. So that's what you enjoyed about it, was being outside. Was it about being with your friends?
Yeah. What was it? Yeah.
Definitely, like being with the friends and playing together and being outside and getting that fresh air, getting the exercise, all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's what it was all about. And, we had such a great time with all that. Yeah.
So when you pictured yourself growing up before you kind of got into an accounting class, what did you originally think you were going to be when you were going to grow up?
Wow, I didn't know. And I took one of those tests that you get from like the guidance counselor, it tells you like, what are you supposed to be when you grow up? And it turns out I was supposed to be a veterinarian.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Did you like animals?
I do. I've got dogs, and I grew up with cats, but now I've got dogs. But I like them both. I'm not a dog or cat person. I'd say I'm either one. But I do. I like animals a lot, and I like, just learning about animals and all that kind of stuff. So I probably would have been okay at it. There's certain parts of the job I don't think I would have liked, though. I'm very compassionate for the animals, so I would have had a hard time with some aspects of it.
Yeah. My best friend's a veterinarian. It's a much dirtier job than people think. Everyone's like, oh, it's so cute.
There's probably some ugly stuff.
It's funny. I took one of those tests when I was in, I think I was a freshman in college or sophomore in college, and it came up with one answer, and that was a tattoo artist. So, but I did think about it later, and it was like, well, I have this creative side and this exact side, and really to be a tattoo artist, you really have to have both.
Right. Yeah. No, you'd have to be able to think about, what it's going to look good on this person. I get it.
But be very exact. Yeah.
See, I don't have that at all. Like where you were like, oh, I never would have been accounting in high school. I just did not have that creative side. Like I couldn't draw. I couldn't like any of that kind of stuff. It was just not my thing. So.
Yeah. So did your dad take you to the office, or how were you around? Or did you hear about his clients? Like, what type of accounting was he doing?
Yeah, he was doing, he started it back when it was the big eight, right? He was in the big
Hmm.
eight for a little while. And I think he left public accounting when he was a senior. And then he transitioned more into that like traditional controller type of role, and then evolving into more of that CFO type of role. So by the time I was kind of really growing up and learning about work and things like that, he was already CFO level.
Hmm.
So yeah, he would take me to the office though when I was little, especially like if he was working on the weekends or something. He would take me in, and used to build like little radio control cars, those RC cars, and I would go like take my RC car to the office, and since nobody was there, it was a weekend. I would just like drive my RC car up and down the hall and stuff. That was pretty fun. And it turns out like I ended up doing that as an adult too. It was so funny. And Aaronson's gonna kill me, but I used to like sometimes on the weekends during busy season, there'd be a couple of us in there and we'd be working hard, right? And
Yeah.
I'd bring in this like little radio controlled helicopter I had and like fly it around the office and send notes to people and things like that. It's still stuck there even as an adult.
And now you can do it with children.
Yeah. Well, now I work from home mostly, so it's
Right.
like,
Yeah.
it's like not even a challenge at this point.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So then when you went into accounting, you decided the audit side instead of tax. And how did you make that decision, or why?
Yeah. So when I was at Arthur Andersen doing that clerk stuff and then the intern stuff, I actually started out as a tax clerk. So I was on the tax side. So I kind of learned a little bit about the tax side. And I said to myself, I kind of liked it, but I said, why don't I intern for a summer on the audit side just to see what that's like? And I tried that, and I ended up liking that audit aspect a little bit more. So once I was full-time, I dedicated myself to the audit side. And then when I was at Aronson, did a little bit of tax work in the beginning, but mostly it was audit throughout my career there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so how did you end up building your career there, or, taking, whatever knowledge you had? I know there's a big difference between, you've referenced, you're really good at accounting, you understand it and so forth. But when you actually needed to start moving into management roles and supervising people.
Yeah. It turns out that was one of my favorite aspects of the job. So like, I really enjoy being a mentor. I enjoy teaching a lot. So having people working with me, having people that I had to mentor throughout my time there, kind of had to check on their progress, see how they were doing. That was one of the most enjoyable aspects of what I did. I'm a firm believer in the type of person where the person or persons who are working for me, they should become better at whatever it is than I am, right? Because I should teach them everything I know, and then they add their own layer to it, right? Which makes them even better at it than me. So I'm a firm believer in that. Like, you need to pass on your knowledge so that other people can do a great job. So that aspect of it never bothered me. The only thing I didn't like was the billing stuff.
Tracking your time.
Yeah, exactly. But all the human interactions, loved that part of it.
And where did that come from?
I don't know. I think I always
drove that for you.
I think it was always just the aspects of being able to talk to people, especially when I'm in a small group. Like when we're in a conference room with three of us, like I can read what other people are doing. I can help break the ice. I can help make things a little bit more lighthearted in what we're doing. I mean, busy season, you're working 60, 70 hours a week and you're sitting in conference rooms for 4 months on end, right? You got to be able to lighten it up a little bit. You got to be able to have some fun. So I liked doing that aspect of it. So it just, it came naturally for me to be able to interact with people like that.
And were there any industries that you specialized in or that you found you were kind of pivoting your career toward?
Yeah. Aronson gave us a great opportunity to kind of try out different industries. So I did try out the real estate industry, the construction industry, the government contracting industry. I really then kind of focused, as I got to the senior level, focused more on government contracting. So over the years, once I was senior and manager, senior manager, et cetera, I kind of just migrated into that GovCon aspect and really focused on that. And some of the tech stuff too. I was also doing a little bit of tech companies, but mostly GovCon.
Yeah. And so you said that you had your own mentors as well. So did you seek them out, or did they seek you out, and how did they help you? What things did you learn from them along the way?
Yeah, I would say they definitely helped seek me out, but it was, a natural fit, right? I actually had other mentors over the years that kind of came and went, and
Right.
they were good, but particularly I'll talk about Lisa. Lisa helped me in regards of, Lisa taught me this, and I do this for people today. She always asked the right questions or phrased things the right way, where I had to come up with the answers myself, even though she kind of already knew what the answer was going to be, but she never just let me have it. She always let me find my path to get to that answer. And I think that's super important, because you have to be able to make decisions on your own. You have to be able to figure out what path you want to take and how to get there. And that's where I try to do that for people today, right? Like when I mentor people who, let's say, are in the tech industry and they're looking for a new job, I kind of talk about, what are you looking for? What is this? Well, what do you think you need to do if you're going to want to achieve that? I let them talk it out, and eventually they find their answer. So that was something that was super helpful for me and helps me to this day. I still talk to both of them on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm. So how do you, so I know you can model it, but is there any training or things that you started diving deeper in to understand that?
It's interesting. I don't do a lot of formal training on mentoring. I probably could do a little bit where I could polish up some stuff, right? But I've always had this natural ability to talk to people and kind of hear what they're saying, and kind of, sometimes I do need to think about things for a bit, right? So if I'm mentoring somebody and they give me a really challenging thing, I'll be like, okay, let me think about that, and let's have another conversation in a day or two. Mm-hmm. But as far as formal stuff, I never really had a lot of formal training for mentoring or anything.
Yeah, well, I'm more talking about the questioning aspect, because with questioning, not only does it help you in that aspect, it helps you working with clients, it helps you in sales.
Yeah.
So just even that example that you were just saying, to not respond right away when you don't know the answer is a hard thing for a lot of people to say, I'll get back to you.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll tell you the one thing I do for, and this goes for clients, this goes for people I mentor, it goes for everything, is I'll always be like, okay, what's your goal? Where do you want to be? Or what do you want to do? What do you want to achieve? What's your end goal? And sometimes we even shift that end goal a little bit as the conversation goes. But at least if I understand what the end goal is, and I can then kind of backtrack my way of, okay, how do we get there, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes where I might have that, a situation where I have to say, let me get back to you, it's like maybe there's a step in the middle that I'm not quite sure how we, if we're going to go like this to get to your goal, there might be a step here that there's a gap. And I have to figure out how do we bridge that gap, right? And mm-hmm. that's where I need to think about, let me get back to you on that portion of it, or something like that.
So when looking at your career, were there moments that you doubted it? Were there moments that you had any breaks in really enjoying what you were doing, and how did you go through that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, definitely when you're getting into the beginning of March and busy season in public accounting, and you're sitting in the office on a Sunday, you're going, what am I doing? But you fight through it, and it's like anything else. It's like, working out, for example, right? It's the same thing. You work out, you hit plateaus, but then you break through that plateau and you go up again, right? It's the same thing in busy season. You're going to hit ups and downs. You're going to hit plateaus. You got to break through it. So that would be something I definitely looked at for a while. But then when you kind of get out of it, the fog clears from busy season, you kind of think about how much you learned and how much you moved forward, and how much, more advanced you are than you were 6 months ago even. And that kind of drove me to just keep the knowledge going, get smarter and smarter every year. When I switched, it was a big switch out of public accounting. That was the next thing that I questioned, right? Am I doing the right thing here to get out of traditional accounting and go into this IT auditing type of thing?
And what caused that? What caused you to
Yeah. So back in right around, I think it was 2010, when Sarbanes-Oxley was just kicking in for the public companies, or had been kicking in for a little bit now, it started to trickle down to the privately held companies, where you now had to look at IT controls for financial statement audits. We had nobody at the firm at that time that was doing that. So I took it upon myself to learn what that was. How did it work? What did you need to look at for the financials? How did IT controls work? All that kind of stuff. Learned it, developed a work program for the firm to do it for their financial statement audits. From there, natural progression into figuring out about SOC audits, SOC 2, what does that mean? SOC 1, what does that mean? All that kind of stuff. Ended up saying, hey, on all my research, there's a lot of CPA firms doing this stuff. Maybe we should too, right? So I kind of started this IT audit practice at the firm. And that's kind of how I got into it. And for a while, I was kind of dividing my time between IT audit and financial audit. I just made the decision finally. I said, I really like this IT audit thing and I want to take it to the next level. Nothing with Aronson negative. It just wasn't the right time for their clients for that. So I kind of went and joined a cybersecurity firm to help with that aspect, the IT audit and the SOC aspects of what they needed. And that's kind of where it took off from there, because now I had people who've done IT audits for many years. They were able to help me kind of get better at the audit process, things like that. I kind of refined my SOC skills even more, got involved with the AICPA more when it came to SOC, all that kind of stuff. So it kind of started growing from there, kind of spiraling a little bit.
Yeah. And then how did you get on the technology side of it?
Yeah. So that firm I was at after Aronson was called Veris Group, and I started the SOC practice there. That firm, not too long after I started, got acquired by a bigger company called Coalfire. So they're a cybersecurity firm as well. And joined up with their SOC practice. I did a lot of quality control work in their SOC practice. And again, even got more involved with the AICPA. So that was around the time I started getting involved with like the SOC 2 guide, things of that, and getting on those committees and task force, things like that. And that's where, from there, my co-founder for Bytecheck, AJ Yon, he and I worked at Coalfire together. He was definitely way more technical than I was. He knew cloud technology and cybersecurity better than I did. I definitely understood the reporting aspects, and I knew enough about the tech to be dangerous. But that's where kind of he and I started talking about these ideas for automation and IT audits and things like that. What if we could do this? What if we could do this? And once he left and I left, different reasons, different times, but we got back together after we both left. I just wanted to check in and see how he was doing. And sure enough, he said, why don't we give this IT audit automation thing a chance and develop a software to do it? And that's what we did. And really took the aspects of how can we make clients more secure, but also how do we help the auditors? Because he was an auditor, I'm an auditor. A lot of these other firms out there, they don't think about the audit side. But that's where we kind of took that into account.
So what exactly did you develop?
Yeah, so the tool is a tool that is cloud-based, and we can plug in, our clients don't have to be cloud-based, but to get the most benefit of it, cloud-based applications, we can integrate to their cloud environments. So AWS, GitHub, Jira, all that kind of stuff, pull the information from where the data lives, the source data, and be able to determine, are they meeting controls for SOC 2, for HIPAA, for ISO, all those kind of frameworks, and say, okay, you've got data in AWS, it helps meet your logical access requirements for SOC 2, you're good to go or not. And from there, the auditor can log in and also view that data and get what they need to support their audit. Very high level overview of what we're doing, but that's on its surface kind of where it is.
And so this is a big transition in skill set, right? Developing tech versus doing the work. So how have you felt about your expertise and that learning pathway of making this pivot in your career?
Yeah, I said to AJ when I joined up, I was like, AJ, this feels like the culmination of my career to this point, because he knows the tech stuff 10 times better than I do, but I know what this stuff needs to do on the back end. I know what it needs to do in order to satisfy a SOC 2 report, right? So I provide that kind of input to the product. He just makes it work.
Right.
But then I'm also the CFO of this company, right? So we're bringing back my accounting knowledge. We're bringing back all that auditing that I did for so many years. So now, between the first half of my career of doing accounting and auditing, and now the back half of my career focusing on IT auditing and SOC 2 and cybersecurity, it's all come together in this company where I've got to do both.
So leading and growing a company is a very different type of leadership than managing staff through an audit and so forth. What would you say your strengths are as far as that, and what gaps have you found that you've needed to fill?
Yeah, so the strengths I would say come from the ability to see where directions need to go and make sure that we're doing what we need to do, but also doing it fast, right? Mm-hmm. So in tech especially, things move very quickly. And a lot of tech people move very quickly. That's just the nature of how they work. At the same time, I still have an accounting brain, right? So I know that you need to make sure of this, you need to make sure of this, you need to legally look at this, right? There's a legal aspect of that CPA exam that still triggers in my brain every now and then. Mm-hmm. So you got to think about like all those types of things and make sure that the company is running properly in that way. Right. So I help that aspect of it. I think that's a good strength for what I help the company with. The weakness, I would say, is you have so much more responsibility as a chief, whatever officer of a company that you have when it comes to all the people that are working for you, when it comes to the outputs of what they're doing, when it comes to the client satisfaction. I mean, really the buck stops with you, right? You have to be able to make sure everybody's staying in line. So, that's something I'd say could be a little bit better. It's really hard as a CFO to be able to talk to people one-on-one regularly, be in the trenches with them, especially in these virtual environments these days. Like our company is completely 100% remote, and I haven't been to an audit on site in almost 2 years. Right. So, you've got to be able to maintain some sort of one-to-one with some of these people to make sure that they're getting what they need, that the clients are getting what they need, et cetera. So that's something that's extremely challenging in these environments.
Yeah. So how do you fill that?
We use, I'm not going to endorse it. I'm just going to say we use Slack. Mm-hmm. Microsoft Teams is another way to do it, but we have Slack, and that we call that like our virtual office, right? So mm-hmm. We've got in these Slack channels, not only do we have work related stuff and client related stuff, but we have a channel, for example, called Question of the Day. And you could just post a question in there. Like, I think the question the other day was like, do you like hot dogs or hamburgers better, or something. Right. We just ask random questions in there. 2 weeks ago, we had a wonderful little like trivia night type of question in the company where we did like a virtual trivia night where everybody was there and the winner got like a prize, So you got to do things like that to keep people engaged in these remote environments, because yes, you have meetings and things like that, but then once you hang up that meeting, you're right back in this home office by yourself. Right. So, that's how we treat that virtual office. And with Slack and Teams and everything else, you can still have one-to-one conversations, etc. We try to post funny things. Like we're big on memes. We love memes. So we do a lot of that too to kind of keep people happy and laughing.
Yeah. So, I know you've talked about like you've had moments of just, especially during these times or maybe other times through your career of just making sure that your whole mind, body, spirit is good. How do you know when you're getting off track and what do you do to offset that?
Yeah, that's
sure you're putting out the energy you want.
Yeah. It's Amy, that is so super important. I can't stress that enough. I was for years, and I still do. I was, weightlifting and all that kind of stuff, and more though in the last couple of years, I've shifted more into like that yoga type of mindset, right? Mm-hmm. Where you kind of keep that mind-body connection. I have to admit, I'm not the best meditation person. I'm still trying to figure out how to make it work. But that's important too. And then even, mental health wise, like, maybe people need to see someone on a regular basis. Maybe it's just a conversation now and then with somebody, but like, you need to keep the mind, the body, and the spirit all aligned and healthy, because that's going to in turn make not only your business relationships healthier, it's going to make your personal relationships healthier, all that kind of stuff. And part of that is also taking breaks, right? You don't get a trophy at the end of the day for working 80 hours a week. And don't get me wrong, I understand owning businesses especially is hard and you've got to work a lot of hours. That doesn't mean you can't take a break. And even at our company, we have a 10% rule, which means 10% of the week. So, and we're basing this on a 40-hour week. So 4 hours out of the week, we want people to use those 4 hours, whatever they want. If they want to go and do yoga, if they want to go for a walk, if they want to read, if they want to study for something that they're studying for, if they still want to work, that's fine too. But we allow people to do that, no judgments. And I think that's super important, because being refreshed, being mentally clear just creates better work in the end for people, and more satisfied work in the end for people.
Yeah, for sure. And do you ever discuss what people do during those 4 hours?
Yeah. We'll say, how are you using your 10% this week? And, if somebody doesn't want to talk about it, that's totally cool. But a lot of times we see a lot of cool stuff too. Some people will be like, oh, I went for a hike, or, oh, I played golf today, or, oh, I did some meditation for an hour and then decided to use the other 3 hours in work because I felt so good after. Great. We love hearing about that. So we'll ask those questions a lot to see how people are doing and to see what they're doing, and maybe give other people ideas on something they can do that they didn't think of. So it definitely helps.
So what do you do to create boundaries around that though? Because, those types of corporate things are, you can say it and then someone schedules a meeting over the 1 hour they wanted to take for something, or so forth. So how is the corporate communication to make sure that it's taken seriously or as a priority?
Yeah. So
it doesn't create more work. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
Right. We definitely tell people well, first I'll back up. We are so much more based on tasks as opposed to hours, right? So we believe in, here's the things you have to do and here's when they're due by. I don't care if you want to do them today, if you want to do them next week, if it's due 2 weeks from now, you can do them next week. You could do them at 2:00 in the morning if you like, as long as you're attending the meetings that you're supposed to attend during the day. But if you want to, work later at night and you need to do something with your kids during the day or whatever it is, go ahead, do it that way. It's just task based, right? And then, but for that 10%, we'll say block your calendar. Don't have meetings during that time. If something comes up that's an absolute urgent thing that we need help with, we'll ask you if it's okay or not. But most of the time that doesn't happen. And the other thing too is we'll tell them, go off of Slack. Don't be available during that time if you're having your 10% time. So we definitely want people to take advantage of that for sure.
So where did you come up with this idea to do this, and why?
I have to give credit to AJ for that one. That was AJ's idea. AJ is also, he has a military background. He was a captain in the Army. So I think he also recognizes, what long hours and stress can do for people and how important those 10% breaks can be for people and what they do. I mean, he was a leader for many years in the Army, so he understands that kind of stuff. So that was his idea to do that. And when I heard about it, I was all for it. So, yeah.
Awesome. So as far as your relationship with AJ being co-founders, what have you had to learn as far as being partners and being able to disagree, move forward, keep a vision, that sort of thing? Absolutely.
These are all things that are so true when it comes to co-founding a company. He and I, when we met, we were great friends. We're still great friends. But we've definitely had our arguments, and we've had different opinions on things, and maybe the way we executed something wasn't the way the other person thought it was going to be done. And what we did, to be honest with you, is we came and to the table with each other and said, look, here was what happened. Here was the issue I had with it. And we kind of worked it out as to, okay, well, I understand now where you're coming from. I won't do that again. So now I understand what you're thinking. So you have to learn how that other person thinks, how they operate, and also, what you need to be able to stand up and say, I don't agree with this, versus, okay, I get what you're saying. I think that can work. You have to kind of feel them out. I wouldn't say there's a one size fits all answer in that. But you definitely have to. That's the other thing. I've had people ask me before, hey, should I go into business with my best friend? And I say, yeah, you can go into business with your best friend. Just be aware you're going to argue with them on certain things. And you just have to be able to get through that. You have to be able to communicate and have open communication. I think open communication is one of the biggest things. You have to say, okay, I did X, Y, and Z. And, sometimes it's going to depend too. Like, you might think it's not a big deal, but maybe they did. So kind of making sure you have that open communication of what's going on so that other people can be aware of it.
So do you have some agreed upon way that you resolve arguments or bring things to the table?
Yes. So if we start arguing on Slack, him or I will immediately say, okay, phone call. Because I found this out back even in public accounting when I was doing that a lot of times when you write an email, or now it's Slack and Teams and all that kind of stuff, words can be misinterpreted, the way you wrote them in the email, or the way you wrote them in the Slack message. They might be picked up in a different tone on the other end, right? And you didn't intend that. So a lot of times if there's an argument starting, that's when I'll say, phone, let's have a phone call so that we can talk it out on the phone. Because then when you can hear the person, you can understand their tone, you can understand where they're coming from, right? In person sometimes is even better. When I was in an office and I was working with people in the office and I had to have a serious conversation, I always want to have that person face to face. So super important to communicate that way. So I would say big advice for people is when you've got something that you need to work with somebody on, or they might disagree with, always pick up a phone and have an actual conversation so they can hear your voice rather than write an email.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
So I like to end with some rapid fire questions. So I'm going to ask you some questions, but you pick a category. So either family and friends, money, spiritual, or health.
Health.
Okay. Things or actions that I don't have that I want.
I would like a more regular routine as to working out. As a co-founder, you start to lose a lot of hours in the week. It takes a lot of hours to co-found a company. I used to work out 4 or 5 times a week regularly in the morning. Kind of has gone away in the last couple of months. So I'd like to get back to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Things or actions that I do have that I want with my health.
So I've started it. So I'm doing more yoga. I love that. I want to keep that going. I think stretching, flexibility as you get older, especially, is more important. Because I do enjoy playing golf as well, and I think stretching and flexibility is those are my hobbies these days: golf and martial arts.
Love it. Yeah.
So flexibility is super important for both. Yeah.
Things or actions I don't have that I don't want.
Bad food. I'm not a proponent of junk food. I don't eat fast food, things like that. I don't want that. Yes. Yeah.
I agree. Things or actions that I do have that I don't want.
That I do have, procrastination. And I know that that's not necessarily health related, but I would say it's mental health related.
Health. Yeah.
Yeah. That can create more stress, right? When you procrastinate on something, and then you got to deal with it later, you do create more stress.
Yes.
So I would love to get rid of that.
Well, thank you so much for all of that you've shared. Before we end, is there anything that you want to make sure we didn't cover off today, or any takeaways that you want to make sure people leave with?
I would just say one of the biggest things, and this is, more recent for me, find your path to mental health just as much as physical health. Again, that mind-body connection that I mentioned before is super important. So again, I just kind of touched on, I do martial arts. I've been doing martial arts for, 15 years now. And sometimes, just doing some of the movements there and those katas that we do and things like that just brings me better into a mental health state. The yoga helps, meditation, things like that can help. It's so important. I just think it's so underestimated. And I think a lot of people are getting it now, I think more than they used to, but there's still, I think, a stigma out there for a lot of people that says, oh, I don't need that. I'm fine. I'm just wonderful. I'm totally fine. And it's like, I don't know if I always believe that. I think it's super important for people to recognize that not everything might be perfect, and that's okay. You just need to work through it and figure it out.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on today. And I appreciate you sharing your story.
Absolutely, Amy. It was a pleasure and always happy to be here and hope to keep talking to you in the future.
Sounds good. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
And now for my mindful moments with my interview with Jeff Cook, who began his career as a CPA. And like we talked about, his father had been a CPA and later on a CFO in corporations as he followed his career and eventually decided to go down the same path. And what I thought was so interesting, because it was different than my own experience, was when he started his first accounting class, it came easy to him. I had a very different experience, but in essence, really tied him into the profession, and knowing that his dad had had this great career, that it solidified his path to becoming a CPA as well. And I think many of us, when we look back at why we start a career or why we don't go into a career, can be for similar reasons of what we're used to and what we've seen. And so understanding our impact on the people around us and the impression that we give on the work that we do is so important. Because if we're coming home every day complaining and not having fun in what we do, our children see it, our friends see it, our spouses see it, and we start losing that happiness that we have. And so if we want to inspire people around us and also feel differently about what we do, it's important that we don't pigeonhole ourselves in just one thing that we started out as. And as you saw through Jeff's career, it pivoted along the way of different opportunities that came into his life that he didn't even know he would be interested when he first started out as an accountant and a CPA. That he went down a traditional path, but then started spearheading his own area where he saw opportunity in when Sarbanes-Oxley came out and the SOC reports and so forth. So keeping your eyes open to where the opportunities are can drive a path for you that you might have not predicted. And sometimes it's important that we don't hold on too hard to what we think might happen in our career, but instead follow where our passion goes without leaving the expertise that we have. So maybe you're frustrated in the work that you're doing today, but it's important to step back and observe and say, what are the things I like about what I do, and what things would I like to remove, and where am I willing to take a risk? Where am I willing to learn more? And that was really what his path was about, is no one taught him about this field that he ended up going into. He started joining groups and committees and getting involved in associations so that he could get more and more experience in the work that he was really finding a passion in, which led him to working with a cybersecurity firm that eventually led him to creating software that would solve for people and practitioners that were just like him. And those are the things we can't predict in our career. But that's where the excitement happens, is just stepping back as the observer of our career and finding where those pockets are of excitement and really pushing ourselves to continue to learn. In addition, One of the really important things that we talked about that he does as his company that I just wanted to point out was the 10% rule. That it was important for all of his staff to not just work themselves so hard that they lose the joy in their work, that they took 10% of their week, which is 4 hours of a 40-hour week, and use it the way that they want. And there's no pressure about it. And it is a culture where everybody understands that if they see that on someone's calendar and doesn't push someone to give that up, that it's just as important as the other work that you do. Because the importance of these things when we take breaks is it releases our mind and it allows us to step back and maybe solve problems that we couldn't solve when we kept pushing ourselves throughout the workday. When we create a hobby or take a walk or just try to do any kind of mindfulness activity that will offset the stressors of the day, what that will do is help us in being more productive in our workday. So working more hours does not mean more production. But what does mean more production is the quality of time that we're working and that we're keeping our brain healthy. And part of that, which we ended our conversation was on the mental health aspect, is that we take the needed breaks, but we also do the things that we need to do for ourselves personally and not look at it as selfish and so forth, to have hobbies or to have a stigma around seeing a therapist or having a executive coach or whatever kind of outside party that can help be that party that just doesn't have any skin in the game and can give you suggestions that will help you in your life so that you're able to create the energy that you want in your body so that you're better for the people around you. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. I hope you will take a moment to pause before entering back into your day to reflect on this podcast and note 1 to 2 actions you are inspired to do from today's conversation that you could incorporate into your life. To read the full blog and listen back to this episode or any other, you can find them at www.amyvetter.com/Breaking Beliefs podcast and related videos on my YouTube channel. For daily inspiration, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Amy Vetter CPA. I hope that you will choose to like this and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and more so that you can join us for more inspiration on our next episode.